Hey, what's happening, guys? Back to my synth experiments. I thought I would get a little synth kit to play with. You can see here, this is the electronic piano kit, product code 32PMW270032 from Electronic Express. And if it's worth a crap, I am going to put it in my Amazon store for a couple reasons. The first being, I like easy little kits that would be good for teaching kids about electronics and soldering. And it's hard to find a kit, in my opinion, that would interest a young kid, but something that makes noise, I think, would probably do it. So we got a lot of components here, and a nice looking instruction sheet. And it's based on a 555 timer. Very nice. And there we have our schematic. Product layout. So let me get set up and we're going to solder this and put it together. Okay, so my first observations are that the circuit board is somewhat shaped like a piano, which is nice. It's also an FR4 fiberglass board, so it's solid. And what's very nice is that you can see the traces on here very easily. Now, all of these resistors that go with the switches are 4.7K, so I'm going to put those in first and then we'll solder them up. Alright, so I have all the resistors in place. Got my roll of 60/40. Got the iron heated up. And I think we're ready to do some soldering. Even with my own kid, who's 14 now, I have found that it's getting really difficult to get kids away from their phone or their PlayStation or their Xbox and get them involved in not just electronics, but STEM in general. And I mean, I personally, in my view, this is important for a number of reasons. Not just for the children's betterment, but for the betterment of our country as a whole. I guess there's an argument to be made that playing on the phones and all that is increasing the technology in kids. And well, to some extent, I'm sure that it is. But to another extent, maybe they'll all grow up to be game programmers. But we need a generation who can do more than just program their phones and write games. We need a generation who can design and build these things. So I think in that case, a little kit like this can be something that can, help get the kids interested and get them learning. I started this channel a couple years ago for two reasons. The first is to have something to do, and the second is to try and get people interested in technical things. It also makes a little bit of money. Not much. But the spreading the knowledge thing has worked out pretty well, which is something that I have been doing for the last 5 years. If you guys have followed along with me for any length of time, you know my story. I graduated from high school and I went to the Navy. And I went to the Navy because, one, my family didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a school custodian and a bus driver. My mother was a clerk for the city water department. So I couldn't really ask them to foot the bill for college. And I really screwed around in high school, so I didn't have the grades for a scholarship. So I picked the Navy because it was the most technical of the services and offered the most training. I took the ASVAB, I scored very high, and I was given my choices. The main two choices they offered were the nuclear route, where you learned about nuclear reactors and that stuff, and sonar, which was probably the most technical of the Navy's, well, the most electronics oriented of the training programs the Navy offered at the time. Plus, it offered me my crow right out of boot camp. If you're unfamiliar with the Navy, the crow is the little eagle symbol that non-commissioned officers get. So I went from an E1 to an E4 directly out of boot camp. Then I did my sonar training, and then it was time for another decision. Did I want to do above water or below water? And just because of the money factor involved, you got C-pay, you got sub-pay, you got hazardous duty pay, I chose to go with submarines, which turned out to be fortuitous because I was assigned to a ballistic missile submarine, the USS Pennsylvania. And ballistic missile submarines, except in times of war, have two crews, blue and gold, who work on alternating 90-day cruises, which means you were at sea for 90 days and you were ashore for 90 days. And while I was ashore, I was able to go to school, which the Navy paid for. So already, plus, you know, I'm 18, almost 19 years old, and I'm getting my college for free while having a shitload of fun in the Navy. So by the time I separated from the Navy as an E5 second class petty officer, I had my bachelor's degree. Then I was approached by the Navy whether I wanted to re-up or if I wanted to work as a civilian for the Navy. So I chose to work as a civilian for the Navy, which also tended to work out quite well in my favor because my Navy experience got me in at a higher GS level. And I spent a few years working for naval research. Okay, we got all the switches soldered in now and all the resistors. Here's a diode. Let's do that one next. This is a 1N4007, which is your standard small signal diode. The stripe marks the cathode. So you just want to make sure you line up your stripes here. Real simple. So, where were we? Okay, just got done working for the Naval Research, and I wanted to come back home. So I found a job at Bayer International. That is B-A-Y-E-R, the aspirin people. But they do a lot more than aspirin. And they have a big facility in Pittsburgh, which is only a 30-minute drive from my hometown. Toronto, Ohio, even though it's a state away, is basically a suburb of Pittsburgh. Okay, we got some ceramic capacitors. C1 and C5. Where are they hiding? There's C2, C4, C3. There's C5. I'm guessing that's C1. No, that's an LED. There, okay, C1 and C5 are 220 microfarad. So that's these guys. They're electrolytics, which means they're polarized. Long leg is positive, short leg, and the side with the stripe is negative. So I started working for Bayer as a process engineer, which basically means I worked on their equipment, helping to troubleshoot, upgrades, stuff like that. And Bayer also had a go to school free program. And right there in Pittsburgh is Pitt, the University of Pittsburgh. So I went there and got my master's degree. And I stayed at Bayer until about 6 years ago. I had a lot of fun working there. A lot of travel. Got to play with some really neat stuff. Mostly I worked with power supplies. Designing, upgrading, repairing power supplies. But I started getting sick. Alright, let's try the ceramic capacitors. C2 and C3 are 0.01 microfarad. That's these little guys. And they are not polarized, so we can put them in either way. What did I say that was? C2 and C3. So after a few doctors and getting diagnosed with congestive heart failure, I just couldn't do the job anymore. I couldn't do the travel. And I resigned from Bayer. But luckily, I'd met some folks at the Community College of Allegheny County, C.C.A.C. And I was able to get a job initially as what's called a lecturer, which means basically I worked for a professor and gave his lectures. After about a year of that, I got bumped up to adjunct professor, which means I taught my own classes. And I only taught the freshman classes. You know, introduction to electronics principles, magnetism and electronics, stuff like that. And I did that up until I just retired at the end of this semester. Because, again, health reasons. The doctor said, no more. The stress is what was causing me problems. Okay, LED, again, polarized. long leg positive. So basically she said, you must retire. You can't do it anymore. So I did. Officially, I don't retire until the end of July, but I am retired now. But I'm an on-the-go guy. I like to always be doing something. And while hobbies are fun, you can't just sit around and be unproductive. So, and don't tell my doctor I told you this, because she'll kill me. A friend of mine, somebody I went to high school with, her father is very involved with his church. And they were looking for somebody to do maintenance, janitorial stuff, 3 days a week, little part-time job. And I went and I interviewed for the job. And the person interviewing me was my old high school biology and anatomy teacher. So she hired me. So now 3 days a week, I take care of this church in town. Like I said, something to do. Unfortunately, well, I don't particularly care, but it annoys my family. It's a Methodist church, and we were raised Catholic, although I haven't gone to Mass since my son was born, mostly because all they do is ask for money. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. We've only got a couple more things to put in place. So we've got a switch for the frequency range, a power switch, the speaker, a DC jack, and battery in. What should we do next? How about the power switch? So, anyway, take care of the church, and it's an old church. It was built in 1851. They're looking to get a new roof. They had a meeting yesterday. It's going to be $70,000 for a new roof, which is, I think, reasonable for the size of the place. However, the sanctuary, the plaster's cracking and all that, and it's going to cost them $100,000 to redo the plaster in the sanctuary, which really doesn't seem like a big deal. But you know, it's a church, so the sanctuary is like 4 stories high. $20,000 of that $100,000 is just for the scaffolding. Isn't that crazy? So anyway, I have gone from being a sailor to an engineer to a teacher and now to a custodian. But it's all good because I'm still alive. Which, when I got this diagnosis 6 years ago, I didn't know if I would be. Didn't know if I'd get to see my son graduate from high school or any of that kind of stuff. Tomorrow's his last day of school. I'm picking him up early, taking him to lunch, and we're going to see Deadpool 2. Uh-oh. There's a problem. Do you see it? Let's zoom in. Hey, focus. Focus. There we go. I made a solder bridge there. No es bueno. All you gotta do is kind of whack it out, and we're good. So my son, pretty smart kid. He's never gotten anything but straight A's. Whoopsies. Right back. So we got to meet with his guidance counselor the other day and plan out basically his whole high school career, which is cool, except for one thing. He wanted to take French. And I told him, there's no way I'm letting you take French. Not that there's anything wrong with the French language, but the school only offers French and Spanish. And I still got that solder bridge there. As far as I know, the only people that speak French are the French and some misguided Canadians. Whereas just about the rest of the world speak Spanish. Now, I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, and I wished that I had taken more. Especially when I got to San Diego. But I found out, I don't know, I call it the hard way. Probably the best way to learn a foreign language is to basically live in a place where you're the one that doesn't speak the foreign language, because then you're pretty much forced to learn it if you want to communicate. So San Diego is where I was stationed, and I picked up a good deal of conversational Spanish. By being thrust into it. Now, on the good side of meeting with his guidance counselor, like I said, the kid is smart. He is going to take college courses starting next year with biology and art history. So if he does well and goes through all the planning that we've done, by the time he graduates high school, he will have also finished up his first 2 years of college. Which means when he goes to college, he'll go in as a junior and not as a freshman. What the hell did I do with that piece of tape? He is waffling between wanting to be a pharmacist, which I think is a wonderful profession, and a physicist, which I think is a noble profession. But I told him, I said, if you want to make money, go with the pharmacy. Because unfortunately, scientists do not get paid a huge amount of money. But he's got plenty of time to figure that kind of stuff out. Yeah, need more tape. Anyway, this kit has come together pretty well. I think it would be a good kit to get some youngsters involved in learning electronics, which is the whole reason I'm here. See, it goes right with the channel title, Learn Electronics. He asked me last week, my son I'm talking about, he said, can I go to Kalahari with my friends in June? Kalahari is a water park in Erie, Pennsylvania, about 5 hours from here. I'm like, well, who's taking you? And he said his friend Carl's mom and dad are taking him and Carl and his sister. Carl's sister. Blake doesn't have a sister. Oh, shit, I just gave you my son's name. Oh, well. And a couple more of their friends. I'm thinking, well, God bless those crazy people. If they want to take a whole bunch of kids, more power to them, right? Okay, onto the speaker. It is a 4 ohm 3 watt speaker. I doubt it's going to be very loud, but doesn't have to be, does it? We're almost to the end, in case you're tired of listening to me babble, or if you have skipped ahead. And yes, I tinned these wires while you weren't looking. If you can tin a wire before you solder it, do it. As Chief Perez taught me many years ago in the Navy, solder flows where solder has been. So tin, tin, tin. Did I completely? Okay. Ding, never find that, right? Alright, before we put that on, let's attach the legs. I had a feeling that this would be a 555 timer. Man, it's just one of the, I'm going to call it the top 3 simplest ways to create an oscillator. Another easier way, is to attach the input to the output of an inverter. And if you know your logic at all, think of it like this. When there is nothing attached to the input, that's a 0. So the output will be a 1. When the 1 comes out of the output and goes to the input, it will then become a 0. So it will oscillate at a very high frequency. How can we slow down the frequency? I'm glad you asked. An RC circuit, a resistor and a capacitor together. Use a variable resistor or a variable capacitor, and you can tune your oscillator that way. And probably the third way would be a relay. We'll make a relay oscillator in an upcoming video. Lately I've been kind of stuck on the old synthesizer bit. Okay. Let's hook up our speaker. And we'll put a battery in this guy. See how she sounds. And I'll tell you what else. We'll we'll put it on the oscilloscope so that we can look at what the wave looks like, and we'll be able to see the frequencies, and we'll also check out how they match up to the standard musical frequencies, where 440 hertz is middle A. All right, let me find a 9-volt battery. One 9-volt battery. And we'll turn her on. Hey, the LED lights up. Can you see that? Let's see what she sounds like. Doesn't sound right to me. That la sounds a little low. Let's get the old oscilloscope here. Whoops, sorry. And see what we're getting. Oops. Not a good place to hook on here. Alright, let me get the oscilloscope set up. Alright, we're ready to test it. Now, 555 timer outputs what? Square waves. But, let's take a look down here at our board real quick. We have a number of capacitors. Now, I'm assuming that these electrolytics are just used for DC blocking, but we should still see a charge-discharge curve. All right, here we go with the lowest. 735.8. 803.26. 882, 979. But more importantly than the actual frequency numbers, if you skip those spikes on the top and bottom, you're seeing that little discharge curve from the capacitor. So we're getting a hard-on, dirty minds. There we go. We're getting a hard attack, then a slight decay as the capacitor discharges, and then a drop. Okay, so if we start with the lowest note, then we come back here and we look. We are getting 720. And the closest thing that comes to is an F sharp 5, which should be 739.9. The next note, 781, is a G5. Then 855 is somewhere between a G sharp and an A5. But that's enough. You get the idea. It is a neat little kit. It was easy to put together. It makes not unpleasant sounds, which somewhat correspond to the musical notes. You know, we have to take into account that the values of the resistors and the capacitors are not exact, what they call for, so that's going to throw off our frequencies a little bit. But it is pleasant to listen to, and I like it. So I will add this to my Amazon store. I think this is like $12. I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little something about how the musical note frequencies correspond. And yeah, pretty cool. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Feel free to comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe. Big thanks to the patrons. Couldn't have done this without you. That's it. I'm out. Peace.